Trump thought he won. He slapped 25% tariffs on Canada. He demanded NATO spending at 2%, or he would crush Ottawa economically. He called Canada a national security threat. For 3 weeks, it looked like Canada had no answer. Then Mark Carney walked into the room. Former governor of the Bank of Canada, former governor of the Bank of England, the only person alive who has run the central banks of 2 G7 nations. And within 60 days of becoming prime minister, he did something no one in Washington saw coming. He did not fight the tariffs. He used them. He turned Trump's own trade deal into a weapon that is now draining $200 billion out of the American economy. Trump wanted to punish Canada. Canada just made America pay for the punishment. And the worst part for Washington is that everything Carney did is perfectly legal under the agreement Trump himself signed. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how Canada turned Trump's tariff war into the most expensive policy mistake in modern American trade history. First, how Canada hit the 2% NATO target in a way that cuts American defense contractors out of billions in future orders. Second, the loophole inside Trump's own USMCA trade deal that Canada is now exploiting to redirect its entire auto supply chain away from Detroit. Third, how Canadian oil is being repriced right now in a way that is making gasoline more expensive for every American driver. And fourth, why Washington is quietly panicking, because the retaliation bill just hit $200 billion, and Congress never saw it coming. Every fact in this video comes from confirmed trade data, government statements, and verified reporting. This is not opinion. This is the math behind the headlines. And the math says Trump walked into a trap he built himself. Before we get into it, hit subscribe and like this video so I can keep making these breakdowns for you. And drop a comment below telling me where you are watching from. We read every single comment, and your suggestions help us pick what we cover next. All right, let me show you exactly how this trap works. And it starts with the one move everyone thought was a Canadian surrender. When Canada announced it would hit the 2% NATO spending target, everyone assumed Trump won that fight. He did not. What Canada actually did with that money is the first piece of this trap. And when you see where the dollars are going, you will understand why the Pentagon is furious. Here is what happened. For years, Trump hammered Canada for spending only about 1.3% of GDP on defense. His demand was simple: hit 2% or face consequences. In early 2025, Canada announced it would meet the target. Headlines everywhere said Trump got what he wanted. But here is what nobody reported. Canada did not just increase spending, it restructured where the money goes. Traditionally, about 70% of Canadian military procurement went to American defense contractors: Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, General Dynamics. Billions of dollars flowing south across the border every year into American factories and American jobs. Carney's government quietly began redirecting that pipeline. New procurement contracts are being steered toward Canadian manufacturers, European suppliers, and in some cases, South Korean defense firms. Canada committed to buying 88 F-35 fighters from Lockheed Martin under a previous deal worth roughly $19 billion. That deal stands. But the next generation of contracts, the maintenance agreements, the ammunition supply chains, the naval programs, those are being restructured to reduce dependency on American suppliers. Canada is spending more on defense, but American companies are getting less of it. Trump demanded the 2%. Carney gave him the number and took away the revenue. The Pentagon is watching billions in future contracts get rerouted to European and Asian competitors. And every dollar redirected is a dollar that no longer supports American defense manufacturing jobs. That is not defiance. That is financial engineering. And it is only the first layer of this trap. But the NATO spending shift is pocket change compared to what Carney found inside Trump's own trade deal, a loophole so devastating that it could dismantle the American auto industry from the inside. And the cruelest part is that Trump's team wrote the clause themselves. Let me show you. In 2020, Trump signed the USMCA trade agreement, which he renamed from NAFTA, and called the best trade deal in history. Inside that agreement is something called rules of origin. Here is what it means in simple terms. For a car to be traded tariff-free between the US, Canada, and Mexico, 75% of its parts must come from North America. If it falls below 75%, it gets hit with tariffs. Trump designed this rule to keep Chinese and European parts out of North American cars. It was supposed to protect American auto workers, but it created a vulnerability that nobody in Washington anticipated. Here is how Canada is exploiting it. When Trump slapped 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, he effectively told Canada, "You are no longer a preferred trade partner." Carney's response was strategic. If the US is going to treat Canadian goods like foreign goods, then Canada has no incentive to keep buying American parts to meet the 75% threshold. Instead, Canada has begun negotiating alternative supply agreements with manufacturers in South Korea, Japan, and in some cases, China. Canadian auto plants are exploring whether they can source specific components from Asian suppliers at lower cost. If those components enter Canadian assembled vehicles, the cars may no longer meet the USMCA 75% rule. And here is where the trap snaps shut. If Canadian assembled vehicles no longer qualify for tariff-free trade under USMCA, Trump's own tariffs apply to them. But those same vehicles compete with American-made cars in global markets. Canadian manufacturers using cheaper Asian parts can undercut Detroit on price worldwide. Detroit is stuck paying American supply chain prices. Canadian plants are free to shop globally. Trump's tariff was supposed to make Canadian goods more expensive. Instead, it gave Canada a reason to find cheaper suppliers everywhere else. And every supplier Canada finds outside America is a contract an American parts manufacturer loses permanently. The U.S. auto industry depends on $13 billion worth of parts flowing across the Canadian border every year. That flow is now being repriced, rerouted, and in some cases permanently redirected. Trump built the wall. Carney found the door Trump left open. Now here is where this stops being a trade policy story and starts becoming your problem. Because what Canada is doing with oil right now is going to hit your gas station, your heating bill, and your grocery store. And it is already happening. Let me show you the numbers. Most Americans do not realize this, but Canada is the single largest source of oil imported into the United States. Not Saudi Arabia, not Iraq, not Venezuela, Canada. Roughly 4 million barrels per day flow south from Alberta into American refineries. That is about 60% of all U.S. oil imports. American refineries, especially in the Midwest and Gulf Coast, are specifically built to process heavy Canadian crude. They cannot easily switch to other sources. Trump knew this. He believed it gave America leverage. If Canada depends on selling us oil, we hold the cards. Carney saw it differently. If America depends on buying our oil, we hold the cards too. And then he played them. Canada's Trans Mountain pipeline expansion, completed in 2024, opened a route to ship Canadian crude west to the Pacific coast and from there to Asia. For the first time in history, Canada has an alternative buyer. China, India, South Korea, and Japan are all willing to purchase Canadian heavy crude. Carney's government has not cut oil exports to the U.S. What it has done is signal to markets that those exports are no longer guaranteed at discounted prices. For decades, Canadian crude traded at a significant discount to West Texas Intermediate, the American benchmark. That discount has already begun narrowing. Every dollar that discount shrinks costs American refineries more money per barrel, and those costs get passed directly to American consumers at the pump. Midwest refineries that depend on Canadian heavy crude have no short-term alternative. Retooling a refinery to process a different grade of oil takes years and billions of dollars. Trump wanted energy dominance. What he got is energy dependency exposed. Canada did not cut off the oil. It simply reminded Washington that the tap has a second direction now, and markets are already repricing accordingly. So here is where everything connects. The NATO money moving away from American defense contractors, the auto supply chain breaking apart under Trump's own trade rules, oil being repriced against American refineries. Each one alone is manageable. Together, they form something Washington did not prepare for, and the internal numbers are worse than anything being reported publicly. Let me show you what is actually on the table. The Peterson Institute for International Economics estimates that the current tariff war with Canada is costing the U.S. economy between $100 and $200 billion annually when you combine direct trade losses, supply chain disruption, consumer price increases, and retaliatory tariff impacts. American farmers have been hit particularly hard. Canada immediately imposed retaliatory tariffs on U.S. agricultural exports. Pork, dairy, fruit, and wine all face new barriers entering the Canadian market. Canada is America's second largest export market overall. 13 states count Canada as their number one trading partner. Those are not coastal states. Those are Midwest and border states: Michigan, Ohio, Minnesota, Wisconsin. States Trump needs politically. Auto workers in Detroit are watching supply chains fragment in real time. Farmers in Wisconsin are watching their largest foreign customer put up tariff walls. Energy workers in Texas are watching Canadian crude prices rise toward parity, which sounds good until you realize American refineries are the ones paying more. Congress is beginning to ask questions that the White House does not want to answer. How long do these tariffs last? What is the exit strategy? And who exactly is paying the cost? Because the data is now clear. American consumers are paying the tariffs through higher prices. American manufacturers are paying through disrupted supply chains. American farmers are paying through lost export markets. And American defense contractors are paying through redirected procurement budgets. The stated goal was to bring Canada to its knees. The actual result is that Canada found alternatives faster than Washington expected. And every alternative Canada finds is a dependency America loses. So let me bring every piece of this together. Because when you see all four traps lined up side by side, one conclusion becomes very difficult to avoid. And it explains why Mark Carney is smiling while Washington is scrambling. Trump demanded 2% NATO spending. Canada hit the target and redirected the money away from American defense contractors. Trump signed a trade deal with a 75% rule to protect American auto workers. Canada is now using that rule to source cheaper parts globally and undercut Detroit in every export market. Trump believed American oil imports gave him leverage over Ottawa. Canada opened a Pacific pipeline and reminded the world it has other buyers. Trump imposed 25% tariffs to force Canada into submission. Canada retaliated with targeted tariffs on the American industries and states that feel the most pain politically. Each move was designed to punish Canada. Each move gave Canada a reason to diversify away from the United States permanently. And that is the part Washington has not fully processed yet. Tariffs are temporary. Supply chains are not. Once a Canadian auto plant sources parts from South Korea instead of Michigan, that contract does not come back when the tariff is lifted. Once a Canadian oil barrel is committed to an Asian buyer, that volume does not automatically return to Gulf Coast refineries. Once a defense procurement contract goes to a European supplier, the relationship with Lockheed Martin does not reset overnight. Every month this trade war continues, the damage becomes more structural and less reversible. Mark Carney did not panic. He did not escalate emotionally. He did what a central banker does. He read the balance sheet, found the vulnerabilities, and applied pressure to the numbers that matter most. The question now is not whether Trump can win this trade war. The question is whether the cost of fighting it has already exceeded the value of anything he could gain from it. And based on the math we just walked through together, that answer is becoming harder to avoid every single day. Is Trump out of moves, or is Carney just getting started? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe if you want the real math behind the headlines. I will see you in the next one.